This is episode 102 of our Road to Unicum, and today I review the ST-1. This is the Tier 9 Russian heavy tank in the IS-4 lane. We're going to take a look at a pair of battles. First up is a Tier 9 Malinovka encounter, and then we're going to look at a Tier 10 Ruinberg battle. And the reason why I'm showing these two different maps is to show the tanks being played in a very different context. So obviously this is a very wide open map. There is one arty in each team. Going to hill can be particularly painful if there are 2 to 3 arties. There really isn't much you can do about it since hill is very important. You should go up here anyway. What I tend to do if there is more than one arty is get to the windmill as quickly as possible, because you can use that to side scrape. So if you haven't heard what side scraping is, it's a technique where you tuck in the front of your tank behind a physical barrier, whether it's a dead tank or a rock, a building, etc., and then you reverse out at an angle so that you can fire your gun. And what you're trying to do is bait an opponent into shooting your steeply angled side armor. A couple things: climbing up the hill in Malinovka, you want to make sure you kind of stay near the red line as you approach the hill. Sometimes people will go too close to the ridge line, and as a result they'll get spotted and then shot at by tanks who are underneath hill. Now, the thing about a tank like this is it's slow getting to the crest, right? And the problem is, their faster tanks have already reached the windmill. So if I'm going to get up to the windmill, there's going to be a period of time where it's fairly open, and these tanks can shoot me in my lower plate. That really is the weakest part of the armor in this tank. This is a very thickly armored tank. The frontal lower hull at a direct angle is about 185 millimeters effective, and then the frontal hull armor is pretty solid. It's around, I think, 235 to 250 effective, except for a hatch where the driver's hatch is. That's only about 235 millimeters effective, but the sides on this tank are extremely thick, around 140 millimeters thick. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that Waffenträger who's shooting me, because I kept exposing myself on the ridge, but the side hull armor is 140 millimeters thick. And so if you've got it angled, you can make it over 300 millimeters of thickness, plus you've got the track. All right, so one mistake that I had here, I noticed that there were a couple of the Tier 8 Russian heavies down here, and I decided to come down here and bully them. Now, part of the thing is, if you're a heavy, you don't want to go so far that you're going to put yourself in a 1 versus 2 isolation. And then notice here, as soon as my track's repaired, I'm going to turn my tank, get that magical about 25 to 30 degrees of angling towards an incoming gun. All right, but because I was on the ridge, the first time I got shot by the Waffenträger TD, that's going to happen. You generally don't want to set near the ridge because you're too exposed to tanks that are below you. The second time that I got shot by him was my fault, because I knew that he's to the west of me. And think about what you would do here in this particular case. Now, what I'm doing is I'm taking a roundabout loop here, going counterclockwise. What you can do is continue to push northwest where I was, and then aim your gun up and to the right, to the rear of tanks. But the problem is, once you get up there and start to do that, you're fully exposing the side of your turret to incoming fire. And the ST-1 has a really funky, very long turret. It's got this huge long head, and so you've got to be careful about exposing it. The front of the turret is very strong. The cupola is a relatively small target, but the sides, obviously if you're hitting the side of the turret from a side angle, you're only talking about 160 millimeters of effective armor, which is simply just not that much at this kind of tier. Now this FV-4202, I can't figure out what he was doing. He was tucked in behind the windmill, which is great, and then when he pulls out completely flat, which is the absolute wrong thing to do, right? And so if you, the easiest penetration angle is when a shell is hitting armor directly, right, perpendicular. And you can see that this 50 TP, because he's distracted, he gave me, an easy shot with a side turret, and then I'm going to go ahead and bump him a little bit. That can really throw off someone's aim if they're reloaded. But about the penetration thing, think of it like if you're punching a board. You're a martial artist, you're punching a board, you're going to break it. You see in all those demonstrations, they're punching boards that are totally flat to them, because that's the easiest penetration angle. But if you imagine it's just like trying to punch a wall. If you punch the wall straight on, right, drywall, your fist will go through it. If you try punching that at an angle, your fist will slide right off of it. Matter of fact, you can injure yourself. So it's the same thing, you know, that FE42 do, for whatever reason, just pulled out completely flat, not the right thing to do. And I want you guys to think about here, how do you exit hill in this situation? So we've won hill, and obviously I've got terrible camouflage in a big brute heavy like this and very poor vision. And the answer is, the safest thing you can do is to get to the low ground as quickly as possible. And you generally, if in a game like this, which is very close, like if we had a bunch of heavies and we wanted hill big, we could just plow down the A line. Even if that were the case, I wouldn't plow down the A line, because you're going to get visioned and shot at all day, potentially tracked out in the open. The safest thing to do is to take that run and dive down into the skull like I did. You know, I was able to get up to about 40 kilometers an hour, and then the projectile managed to shoot me and ammo rack me, but you know, that's going to happen. But so I made it down here in one piece, and obviously I would have a lot more hit points to work with had I not been shot by that tank destroyer the second time. You know, and because of that, that's going to affect how I have to play the rest of the way, because I'm in danger of being one shot, and certainly two shot. And they're bad chat 12T. It's perplexing to watch people like, why was he running uphill in that particular case? Because he's putting himself into multiple lanes of fire. And then this 40T, he's only partway in the bush. Like, that's not good enough. You're either all the way in the bush or you're effectively out of the bush. I don't know why that he was there. His position would have been fine had he been hiding in the bush to guarantee the first shot advantage. And, you know, the thing about like a tank like this is it's just very cumbersome in terms of its movement, right? Now the great thing is, because the 432 and I are down here, we're spotting these tanks that are within, you know, 1 to 2 squares of us, so within, you know, 150 meters or so. This is enabling the tank destroyers and our Emil 2 up on hill and Artie to fire on them. And then watch what happens to this 432. Now he has to be careful about being spotted by the 40T to our left, and you're going to see he's going to move up to these bushes, but he got spotted on the way up there. He just gets absolutely wrecked. Right, and so you have to be careful. Now, you notice, like, I haven't moved up to those trees yet, and the reason why is because two things. One, the last spotted location of the 40T, he's below us, usually behind that bush, and then if you look at where their 263 is, he's perpendicular, he's off to my right, and so if I try to move up to the bushes in a medium or light tank, there's a good chance I'm going to get spotted before I reach those trees, and that's exactly what happened to the 430. And so you have to be careful, you know, based on the last spotted location, what you can approach in terms of hard cover and soft cover, and to protect yourself. And there's really not much I can do here. You know, I've gotten splashed by Artie, and now I'm one shot, and so, you know, I've got to be really patient. I'm, you know, really urging our Strav 103 to stop heading towards Cat, because if he gets spotted out in the open, you know, he's got a fantastic Ninja camo tank. Plus there's the WZ heavy tank that's in the southwest corner of the map. If he continues, the Strav continues driving northwest, he's putting himself in between crossfire, which just makes no sense, especially since his armor's only good frontally, right? Okay, so in a case like this, you know, a lot of heavies, what they'll do is just kind of keep plowing forward blindly. I don't have the hit points to give. If I were at full hit points, I could consider doing it. It still wouldn't be the smart play. What I would probably do is push down and try to eliminate the 40T if possible. And then this 263, because he's got, you notice I magically got that angle of about 25-30 degrees, and I was moving back and forth to try to give him a bad shot and hopefully bait him into shooting into my tracks, which is exactly what he did. And because he's got poor gun depression, you know, he had to drive up and over the ridge and expose to me his lower plate. So what are the things that, you know, about World of Tanks, if you want to get meaningfully good at this game, you have to spend some time studying the armor profiles. The easiest way to look at the armor layouts is on tanks.gg. They have an amazing 3D modeler for every tank in the game, and so, you know, obviously there are hundreds and hundreds of tanks in this game. So what I recommend is when you're playing a tank and you're grinding it around its tier, when you run into tanks that you don't recognize or don't know the armor layout, after the game, you know, just chill out for a moment, go to tanks.gg, pull up the armor modeler, run your mouse over the tank and get a sense of what its armor layout is. And that's true too for any tank that you're going to play, especially a heavy tank where, you know, parts of the tank are meaningfully well armored. You want to understand what your exposure is. And so you'll see me in the next battle, you know, using that fixed side hull armor by angling it correctly. Okay, so I picked up an Ace Tanker Mastery Badge here, about 5,200 damage done, and obviously I made some mistakes early. Like I said, getting shot the first time by the Waffenträger, that's going to happen. I probably shouldn't be exposing myself at the ridge. Like, all things considered, I may have been better off risking getting shot as I pushed up across that flat crown of the hill to the windmill, because once I get to the windmill, it's super strong. And then notice, as I'm crossing the open area here, I keep my turret pointed to the left, toward that middle road, in case I got spotted and I get shot at, because the turret is just huge on this tank. It's so long. I think it's like probably the longest turret in the game. And so it's a good habit when you're crossing open areas to point your turret in the direction of potential incoming fire. So this is, for example, really important on Mountain Pass. If you're going to the southwest area of the map, which you really should in a heavy-to-go brawl because Ice Road is stupid, point your turret to the side as you cross, just in case you get spotted. And also resist the urge, if you do get spotted and there are tanks that are available for you to shoot, to stop and fire. Remember, position over damage. That should be your mantra as a heavy tank, meaning get in the correct position first, then fire your gun all you want. So this K91's trying to reverse, he's trying to side scrape here, fighting that Object 260. Now I have a shot there on the 50 TP, but he is really, a couple things. He's pretty far away. The gun on this tank is not particularly accurate. And with 258 silver penetration and with only so much of that tank being visible, that's a really tough shot from this distance, right? And I'm side scraping, meaning you can see for the most part in between my reloads, I'm only exposing the side of my tank. The K91's doing the same thing, although he's exposing too much of his side. If this 50 TP were firing at me at this distance, he's most likely, if he hits my side, that shell is going to get absorbed. Okay, so I'm kind of feeling redundant here. So think about where you would go, right? And obviously, if you're in a good position, you don't want to leave it. Right now, I'm feeling kind of redundant with the K91 and our TS5. And moreover, we're taking low-quality shots at the 50 TP. I'd take the shots if it's the only shot that I can get. But in this particular case, it's time for me to move on. And their 50 TP is near a pivot point they've got over by G1, which I actually, from a brawling perspective, I prefer to be in the south spawn. And then from a open field perspective, like for lights and mediums, I prefer to be in the north spawn. It's kind of weird how this map is designed asymmetrically like this. I actually don't know the statistics, but as far as which side that it favors overall in terms of win rates. So I'm having to make the same decision that I did a moment ago. On this map, you can either go to, from the north spawn, E1 or E2 or E3. And which quarter you go down is partly based on the situation, right? And so, I'm feeling, their tanks, I feel like where RT10 is, he's facing off their tanks that are at G1. I feel like G1 is a stronger position. So I'm going to try moving around. Notice this, Skoda is not aware that I'm there at all. So I take my time aiming in. And when you come into someone's visuals and your spotted indicator goes off, you can tell whether or not someone's paying attention, but whether or not they start to move or react. And then that was, you could argue that shot that I just took was preventable from the perspective. I was trying to aim my turret towards the Skoda in terms of he fired at me, but the problem when I crossed was I was giving up too much of my side to this 260. Alright, he just fired. Now, a lot of brawling against heavies is about baiting them into bad quality shots so you can take a shot. That was a very bad return shot in my case, and I really should have taken my time because I knew he was on reload. And here, I'm going to have a really sweet shot because he's trying to get back around the corner. That gives me a perfect opportunity for a tracking shot, which does damage, and he burned his repair kit. Okay, so now I'm side scraping out, like just pulling out, and again, I don't want to show the lower hull of my tank. That is the weakest part of my tank, and he actually punches through there, so he's firing gold ammo, and so that's a good thing to file away. And I turn on all the notifications. You can see that battle log down in the bottom left, so I can see what types of ammo tanks are shooting at me because it's going to influence how I'm going to play them, right? And so in this case, I'm not pulling out to give the 50 TP another shot. Now, even though I'm hiding my lower front plate, there is one area you have to be careful when you're side scraping, when I'm pulling back like this, and it's the right shoulders of the tank. See, right there, I just baited him to a poor quality shot, so I'm going to get a shot as he's backing away. The shot doesn't land, but I had a better quality shot than he did, in terms of the opportunity based on our respective positions, right? But like I was saying, the shoulders of the tank, the ST1, are its weakest area. Frontally speaking, they're sloped, so it's pretty good protection, like 250 millimeters plus. But when I'm side scraping like this, it actually drops the armor value down to around 235 to 240, and it's one of those things. There is no perfect situation unless you are, if you have to expose your hull, and this is all kind of flat land, so I'm going to have to expose my hull if I want to take shots. I'm going to have to give them something to shoot at, and that's why I keep showing them the side of my tank to bait those low quality shots. What I do have to be really careful of is the fact that there are two tanks there, both that object as well as 50 TP, and so if I pull out, I'm going to be pulling out into potentially two guns. Now what I'm doing here is baiting them into shots so that they pull back during their reload. Now I can just sit here and squat on this position. I have the first shot advantage, and it's really important. You can get the first shot advantage when brawling differently than you do. Watch, this guy's going to flatten out. Right there he flattens out. I can see that he's turning his tank to his left, so he's turning his hull counterclockwise. That gave me a flat shot, which enabled me to put him down for the kill. But when you're playing like lights and mediums and TDs, you can play for the first shot advantage based on vision control. They don't see you, you see them. Therefore, you can take your time, aim in, and get the first shot. With brawling tanks, whether those are tank destroyers or brawling tank destroyers, most beefy heavies, or brawling oriented medium tanks like the E50M, what you want to do is bait them into a bad shot, put them on reload, and while they're on reload, then pop around the corner and shoot them. And so this is a bit of a game of cat and mouse. This T10 is also not giving me anything worthwhile to shoot. He's only exposing a little bit of his hull that I can't penetrate, right? And so we're trying to do the same thing to each other. And you got to be patient, So far, really, I've only taken one shot that you could argue a mistake, is that when I turned the corner to E3, I got shot at by the Object 260 when I came around the corner. But beside that, I've been protecting my tank pretty well with positioning. And now this is getting a little bit sketchy. I now have two heavies directly in front of me. And the problem is our other Russian heavies really didn't play this too smartly, right? They are both dead. If you're at low health, you've got to play to stay alive first and foremost. And then that T10 just got a really cheeky shot on me through this little gap in the rubble there. Actually, file that away for future reference. It's when people get you through a window or through a little crack like that, just be aware of it. Now the thing is, normally I would just push around the corner and chase that T10, but because he's got that second tank with him, I don't want to do that. But I do get a sweet side shot there on the T10 as he's trying to wiggle and protect himself. And the T10's thinking about coming around here, and that he put that shot. He's got heat loaded, and it's pretty tough. There really isn't much I can do if someone's firing heat. All the side scraping in the world, if he's got a shot on my front hull, even angle, he's probably going to punch through it, right? And our Waffenträger is trying to support me here. The problem is that he's a pretty easy target because he's got those bat-like ears, and we don't want him to die. Okay, and that shot right there, the 50 TP was angled momentarily. It had a green indicator, and then by the time I fired and the shell got there, it looks like he had turned his tank, so that was a pretty steep angle. But the most important thing is to be patient here. That was a pretty good shot that I took. It just didn't quite go through. And then it seems now that because our K91's pushed up, their 50 TP is pulling off. So actually we could potentially get a 2 versus 1 here. What I don't like what our K91 is doing is he's so far wide. He should be hugging the wall, because what he's doing, he's making it really easy for that 50 TP to potentially pop out and shoot him. One thing you should be careful of too is how much hit points you have. So right now, if I were the T10, I would load high explosive and just hit me on my turret or hull anywhere. He's most likely going to deal damage in this case. And so it looks like, yeah, I mean, really in this particular case, I have to assume that he's got high explosive loaded. He did fire high explosive round at me initially earlier. Okay, so he's pulling back here. The other thing that I got to be careful of is getting shot at by one of their tanks down the alley. Now thankfully I don't have to worry about Artie. Like sitting on these corners, you can get hit by Artie, and Artie's doing the right thing. I mean, he should be helping me, because if I take out this T10, we could potentially close the flank on them in city. And it's a long way. If you're wondering why I didn't chase the T10 around the corner, it's a long way to get around this horseshoe, and then there's no way I'm going to be able to fire at him and then reverse all the way back without him getting at least one shot in return. But because the Striv had been spotted heading to the west, I was able to set up for that first shot advantage when he crossed the gap. So much of what you do really is dictated by how much hit points you have, and how much hit points you have really is largely influenced by the positioning that you have of your tank. And so, that's why if you're wondering why aren't I doing anything, it's because tactically, for me to go around the corner would be a stupid thing to do. The bummer of the situation is, because our other heavies threw their hit points away, they died early, we've lost field, watching the action in field, if we at least won or stalemated, then potentially, we could pull out this game to be a win. And what I was waiting for was that Striv coming around the corner. He should never have come into city to brawl in the first place unless he's going to flat out charge me, which is a viable thing to do. But the worst thing he can do as a non-turreted tank is to try to come around the corner, stop, enter siege mode, and fire at me. Like, that's just not going to happen, especially since he was one-shottable. So now I'm really realizing I have to take a risk. We are losing. It's only a matter of time. So the T10 there, he was firing high explosive, not a surprise. I catch the 50 TP with a nice shot because he was overexposing his whole arm. And here you can see him just scrambling to get out of the way of the T10, and then our Waffentrigger goes around and picks him up from the back. If our team had done a little better in terms of the brawling in city, this should have been a win in my opinion. Right? And the thing is, we don't want to chase him to field because this tank is blind as a bat, and again, I'm totally vulnerable to getting one shot by high explosive. Trying to cap is not an option too, realistically, because it's encounter mode and it would take forever, and this map is tiny. I mean, they would come in and reset us easily before we could close the cap. What's making me nervous about the Waffentrager is he's kind of going off on his own. If he had more hit points, he had 700-800 hit points, sure, go ahead and do it, because you can eat a shot and then hopefully finish off another tank in return. But what I want to do here is, I would expect, since they have one field, that they would go counterclockwise and enter city along the spoke that heads to the southwest. Right? Okay, so our Waffentrager spots their medium tank coming in here. Looks like he lands a shot, and then the Udez missed his return shot, but he's totally one-shottable. Now, the only problem about me stepping through the cap like this is, obviously, if they're paying attention, they know that I must be heading toward the Udez, or at least in the cap now. So that's no secret where my location is, assuming they're rational and smart. And then I'm going to take the time here to go ahead and side scrape out. So pulling out at that angle, showing him my side, hoping he's going to shoot my side. And then right there, notice for a moment it was green, the indicator. Right, his side armor is pretty thin, but because he moved forward, I ended up kind of hitting the rear side part of his hull. But that's exactly what I wanted, him to put in a bad shot, and then while he's sitting here and reload, this is why I saved my repair kit, put a shot through his drive wheel, and then the Scorpion takes me down. So, there's situations where you're gonna have a team where people are gonna throw their hit points away. There's really nothing you can do about it. The main thing is to play your game, try to survive as long as possible, be smart, and try to deal multiples of your hit points if you can in terms of damage, and then hope that your team can pull it out. That was a close match, and I think we could have pulled it out if people had just played a little better. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts and questions on the ST1. Take care.